Welcome to A-Level and AP Physics, a place where you can improve your understanding of physics with confidence. In this video, I will explain motion graphs from A-Level, IB, and AP Physics with examples. I will start from basic level, then I will go to A-Level and AP Physics level. Let's try to understand the basics of motion graphs now. In this case, our assumption is that the body is moving in a straight line. So we are assuming that the body is moving in a straight line. So if we have displacement time graph, let's say on y-axis we have displacement, so its unit is meter. And on x-axis we have time, its unit is seconds. Now, if I draw a line, horizontal line, so what this line is telling us, let's say this is number 1. So this one is simply telling you that no movement, mean the body is at rest. So we can say no movement, or we can also say that body is at rest. You can also say body is at rest, or we can also say that body is stationary. So all of them, they have the same meaning. So the horizontal line is telling us all this, means the body is not moving, same distance but time is passing. Now the next one, for example, if I draw this line, so what this line is telling us, how we can describe the motion of body if we have this kind of displacement time graph. So in this case, simply we need to understand this is the constant speed, or we call this is uniform speed. Let's say this is number 2, so this is constant, or we also call this kind of motion is uniform speed. Uniform speed. Now, if we have, for example, this kind of curve now like this, so what kind of motion is this one? So simply we need to understand this is accelerating, our body is speeding up. So body is accelerating, our body is speeding up. So this is what we need to understand. The last one, let's say if we have this kind of displacement time graph like this, so what this one is telling us. So let's say this is number 4. So this simply means body is decelerating. It means the speed of the body is decreasing, or we can say body is slowing down. So we will simply say body is slowing down here. Now let's move on to next one, velocity time graph. So how we can draw the velocity time graph. Let's say we have on y-axis we have velocity. Let's say here on y-axis we have velocity, unit is meter per second, and on x-axis we have time, its unit is seconds. Now the question is that how we can show the number 1 means no movement here. No movement. How we can show here? No movement simply means that velocity is equal to 0. So simply we have to draw this horizontal line, means the body is not moving. The second one, the number 2, you can see the constant speed. So constant speed, for that purpose we need to just draw the horizontal line. Maybe this line doesn't look very good, but this line is horizontal line. So this is for constant speed. constant speed simply means that the speed, it can be 10 meters per second, it can be 20. So depending on that, you need to draw the horizontal line. Next one. The next one is accelerating. Accelerating simply means the body is speeding up. So this is how we can show the body is speeding up. Body is speeding up. So it means body is speeding up means the body is accelerating. So we can say the body is speeding up. Next one, decelerating means the speed of the body is decreasing. So we can just draw a line like this. So it simply means body is decelerating. So this is for, this means is decelerating. Means the speed is decreasing, is decelerating. So this is how we can show here. So if you wanna use numbers, we can also use numbers. For example, the first one we have here, this is 1. You can also compare them, and this one is 2 and 3, this is 4. So you can see how you can convert from displacement time graph into velocity time graph. Let's move on to next one now. Next one we need to understand is acceleration time graph. So simply we can draw acceleration time graph. So here A we have on the y-axis and we have time on x-axis. Now the first one, as when the body is not moving, it means A is equal to 0. I will simply say A is equal to 0. So how we need to draw that one? Simply we just need to draw line here because A is equal to 0. The second one, velocity is constant. So we also need to understand if the velocity is constant, what does it mean? It also simply means that acceleration is equal to 0. So it simply means, again, you have to draw here, even if body has velocity, body has speed, but that is constant, we just need to draw a horizontal line here. The third one is simply speeding up. In this case, acceleration. It is positive. It has some fixed value. Let's say it has value 10, for example, but this one is positive. So it has, let's say, 10 meters per second per second. So we simply need to draw horizontal line. So it is positive, mean is accelerating. So we just need to draw there. And the fourth one, we need to understand decelerating, the speed is decreasing. So decreasing, it means A is minus. So I will talk about this one, what exactly negative mean. So we will discuss very soon. So this one, you can see negative means you have to draw here. So this is number 4. Decelerating means slowing down, and this one is number 3. So speeding up, for example, maybe some student, they will be little confused with this one. What does it mean positive? What does it mean negative? Positive, you need to understand if the velocity, let's say this is, we have a car, if the car is moving this way, so the velocity we can take to the right, for example, positive. And now if the acceleration is also in the same direction, so we will say in this case body will speed up. So this is what I mean is positive acceleration. And negative simply means that, let's say body has velocity v, this is to the right, and we assume to the right is positive and acceleration is to the left. So in this case body will slow down, and we are saying it has negative acceleration, simply mean deceleration. But negative doesn't actually tells you it will slow down or it will speed up. Speed up simply mean when v and a, they are in the same direction, body will speed up, and when v and a, they are in the opposite direction, body will slow down, or we can say body will decelerate. So this is what you need to understand. Don't get confused with positive, negative, but you simply need to understand when body will speed up, body will speed up. If A and V, they are in the same direction, and body will slow down when they are in opposite direction. So opposite direction. So this is what you need to understand. Now let's move on and try to do some questions now. So let me give you one case, but this is what you need to remember. You can also write down this one. This is very helpful. If you have understanding of this one, you can handle questions at IGCSE level, AP level, and IB level as well. So now let's do some practice now. Let's try to do some examples now. So you can see here, in this case, what is given to us, you can simply see this graph is given and we have displacement on y-axis. So this is the displacement, this is given to us, and on x-axis we have time. So what we need to do, we simply need to sketch velocity time graph for this displacement time graph. So how we can do that one? So the key concept, the key idea is that we need to understand gradient of displacement time graph is equal to velocity. Now, the next thing we need to understand is that if the climbing up, this gradient is positive and this line has zero gradient and this is negative gradient, positive, negative, zero. So simply positive when climb up, you can simply understand climb up means positive gradient, and climbing down, climb down simply is negative gradient. Now let's try to answer first of all this part. So you need to understand what is gradient of this one. So can we write down, I will use M for gradient. So the gradient of this part, let me little clean this one so you can see more in a better way. So gradient of this line, I will say first thing is positive. Now the second thing we need to say is the gradient is positive, is the gradient is increasing. So this gradient is positive, it means that velocity has to be, so it means velocity has to be positive and velocity must have one value, means velocity has to be constant. So it has to be constant. So then we can sketch. And about the second part, what we need to understand, what is the gradient of that line. Gradient is equal to 0. So it means the velocity has to be 0. Okay, so gradient is 0, it means velocity has to be 0. Okay, look at this part now. What is gradient of this line? Is the gradient is positive? Is the gradient is increasing? So simply for this part, we can say the gradient is positive. Positive. So why it is positive? So simply you can see if you draw the tangent line here, so it has positive gradient. If you draw here, even it is more and more positive. So we will say the gradient is positive and gradient is increasing. It means velocity has to be positive. So from here, how we can say, what we can say about velocity, we will say velocity is positive and velocity has to be increasing. Now the next part, you can see until here, this is a straight line. So first thing we need to understand, what is gradient of this one? Gradient of this one is negative and the gradient is constant. So how about velocity? So the velocity has to be negative and velocity has to be constant. How about the last part? How about gradient of this one? So simply we can see the gradient is negative and the gradient is decreasing. So it means velocity has to be negative and velocity has to be decreasing. Okay, let's see how we can sketch velocity time graph now. So here is our velocity time graph. You can see here, let me give you one quick idea about that. The first one, velocity has to be positive and it has to be constant. You can see here velocity has to be positive, it has to be constant. You can see this velocity is positive and this is constant. How about second part? Velocity has to be 0. You can see for this second part the velocity is 0. And the third part, velocity has to be positive, it has to be increasing. So in this part, the velocity in this part here, you can see this part velocity is positive and velocity is increasing. And here you can see velocity has to be negative and constant. So this is what you can see from here. The velocity is constant and negative. Now here the velocity has to be negative and decreasing. You can see here velocity here is greater but negative, means just in the opposite direction, negative, and velocity becomes 0. It means the velocity is decreasing, negative and decreasing. So this is how we can sketch velocity time graph if displacement time graph is given to us. Now let's move on to next one. Now for the next one, concept is the same. We will go a little faster so we can convert velocity time graph into acceleration time graph. Now, how we can answer this one? So you can see here, first of all, what is gradient of this one? Okay, so first thing you need to understand, the gradient of velocity time graph is equal to acceleration. So simply we need to understand the gradient, then we can find acceleration. So what is gradient of this line? Gradient is 0. So how about velocity then? So how about acceleration? It has to be 0. Now in this part you can see as again gradient is equal to 0. M is for gradient. So how about acceleration? It has to be 0. How about gradient here? The gradient is positive. Is the gradient is constant? Yes, it is constant, so it is constant. How about velocity? So velocity, acceleration, yes. So how about acceleration? It has to be positive and it has to be constant. Now how about here? What is gradient of this line? This is simply gradient is equal to 0. It simply means A has to be 0. How about gradient of this line? M for this one, is gradient is positive or negative? So we can say gradient is positive and gradient is constant. So then how about acceleration? It has to be constant and it has to be positive and it has to be constant. So that's all. When you see the velocity time graph, write down, is the gradient positive, is the gradient is constant, is the gradient is increasing, is the gradient is decreasing. That's all, nothing more than that. So let's try to sketch acceleration time graph now. So this is how you can sketch. Now you can see here, for example, acceleration here is positive, you can is 0. Acceleration is equal to 0. You can see here in this part from 0 second to 10 second acceleration is 0. And the next part again acceleration is 0. Means the slope is 0. It means acceleration is 0 from 10 to 20 seconds, as what you can see from here. This part you can see we said acceleration has to be positive and constant. So this is what you can see in the next 5 second acceleration is positive. And here what we said, acceleration has to be 0 again because its slope is 0. So you can see here A is again 0 because slope was 0. And next one, A has to be positive and constant. So this is what we can say, A is positive and constant. So that's all what you need to understand. Be more systematic. Write down the slope, then write down acceleration. Mean the simply slope of velocity time graph is equal to acceleration. That's all, nothing more than that. So don't get confused with this one. Let's move on to next one now. So let's do one practice problem here. I hope you can answer now. So the first thing what you need to understand is that in order to answer this question, so what is given to us? It is velocity time graph. We need to go back to displacement time graph. So what we need to understand is that gradient of displacement time graph is equal to what? It is equal to velocity. So simply this is equal to velocity. So this is the first thing you need to understand. Now, what we have to do now, first of all, is that okay, now what we need to understand here, we will divide this one into four parts. I will divide this into one part, this is over second part, and third and fourth part. So here what we need to understand, the velocity. What is happening to the velocity? Is the velocity is increasing or is the velocity is decreasing? So in this case, the velocity is increasing. So I will just draw increasing. Now, is the velocity is positive or negative? Velocity is positive. So I just write down it is positive. Now we need to go back. So we have to look at the gradient of this one. So now this is for the displacement time graph. Now we need to look at the gradient of displacement time graph. So this is what is telling us the gradient of displacement time graph. So how about gradient of ST graph? So I will write down gradient of ST graph. So the gradient has to be, I will simply say M, it has to be positive and gradient has to be increasing. And so now if you look at this one, the gradient is positive and increasing. No, this gradient is not right actually. This is positive, but this gradient is decreasing. So this is not possible. How about this gradient? This gradient is positive, but this is decreasing. Again, not right answer. So if you look at this one, gradient is positive and increasing. So this can be the answer. So it means our answer can be A or our answer can be D. So these are two possible options. Now let's go to the second part now. So this is what we have done for part one and we can go to the second part now. So for second part, I will just write down here. So first write down what is velocity. How about the velocity? Is the velocity increasing or decreasing? So simply velocity is decreasing. Now is the velocity positive or negative? Velocity is still positive until here. So positive and velocity is decreasing. How about M for ST graph? M for ST graph. I will simply write down ST. So for ST graph, M has to be positive and M has to be decreasing. Now let's move on to third part now. This was our first part and this one is third part. Let's move on. Next one is the fourth. So what is happening here in third part you can see here. What I mean is that this. Now is the velocity is positive or negative? So first thing you need to understand, velocity, it is negative because it is below zero. So is the velocity is increasing, is the gradient is the velocity is increasing or decreasing? So you need to understand the velocity is increasing, it's getting more and more negative. So we will say the velocity is increasing. How about M for ST graph? So we have to understand M for ST graph. So how about M for ST graph? So the M has to be negative and M has to be increasing. Now let's move on to the last part. So what is happening here? Is the velocity is negative or positive? Velocity is still negative. So we simply write velocity is still negative. Is the velocity is increasing or decreasing? Velocity is decreasing. It's from higher velocity to lower velocity. So velocity is decreasing. How about M for ST? So the slope for ST graph we can also write down. It has to follow the same pattern. So M has to be negative and M has to be decreasing. Now let's look at this one now. First we have seen this one here now. Now look at second part. The velocity, second part of this one, velocity has to be positive, gradient has to be positive and decreasing. Can you see from here? Gradient is positive, then it is decreasing. Finally, gradient is 0. So this is the second part. This one is true. How about this one? So we can also see in this case, it is gradient. You see, it is here, it is decreasing. This part is also true. Now let's go to third one now. Velocity has to be negative and increasing. So if we look at this one, so we can see the velocity is negative. So we can see the gradient of this one is negative, but it is increasing until this point. So this is third point. This one is true. So how about here? It is increasing and it is negative. So here, so this can be third part. Okay, the fourth one we need to understand is velocity gradient has to be negative, as you can see here, and it has to decrease. So this is what we can see here. Gradient is negative, finally it decreased to 0 here. So this one is true. So this is also, but the question was asking us, it has to be from t0 to t, one time period. So it means this one is wrong. Actually, this is wrong. Two time period, this is wrong. Actually, time period is not correct. So this one is our right answer. So this was a little bit long, but I hope you got the idea what actually is happening and how to answer next time. So my main purpose was to teach you, so next time you can do by yourself in a very short period of time. So I hope this was very helpful. If it was helpful, like the video and subscribe the channel. I will be uploading part 2 very soon with more challenging questions about motion graphs. See you in next video.